Hello, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about Google Apps at UNCG. Google Apps is an excellent way for you to really optimize your efficiency and your productivity, either as a student or as a staff member. And there are a lot of neat tools and tricks that a lot of people aren't familiar with that we're hoping will really help you be more successful and more efficient in your day-to-day work. And so the purpose of this video and the other ones in this series is to really help you learn more about Google and how you can use it to make your life at UNCG a whole lot easier. And so this first video, we're going to be looking specifically at Gmail, which is kind of the main interface that everyone's familiar with through Google Apps, is their Gmail account, their typical email account. And so most of you are pretty familiar with how to send an email and all that sort of thing. And so I'm not going to go into super basics of that, but really focusing on other ways that you can utilize Gmail in a very useful way. So one of the first things you'll notice over here on the left is I have a bunch of what are called folders. And folders are a way for you to keep your email inbox organized and to not end up with thousands and thousands of emails cluttering your inbox, but still keeping information that you might want to reference later on, or just to keep that information that might be useful. And so folders are pretty simple to use. So I have created a test email for our demonstration here that I'm going to be using for a lot of the different pieces that I'm going to be working with today. And so if I pull up this email, you'll notice that there are a lot of different icons and buttons across the top here. And so the two right here that kind of go together are folders and labels. Now, the way that these two are related is that labels essentially are the names of your folders. So whatever folders you create, anything that goes in those folders gets a label that corresponds to that folder. So let's say, for example, you get this email, and hypothetically it's an email about RA training. So I want to make sure that that gets grouped together with the other emails related to RA training. So I can click on the little label icon here, and if you already have a label created and you know that you want to have that label, you can find it in your list here, or you can simply start to type in the name of it and it'll pop up a lot more quickly. So I'm going to give this the label of RA training, and now you'll see it has this nice little label up here. And what that's going to do is associate it with that particular storage folder, and it's also going to enable me to group it together with all the other emails that have that label. So once it has that label, I can either go back to my inbox and it's still sitting there, but let's say I don't want it in my inbox anymore. So once it has that label, you see this little icon here. This is the archive icon. You can click that, and it automatically dumps it into that folder. A much more direct route, let's say you want that to go straight to your folder instead of just putting the label on here, is you can click on the folder itself, and you'll see it looks pretty similar, and you just start to type that in and type in the name of the folder, and you'll see that it'll automatically dump it in there. Going back for just a moment, let's say you want to create a label or a folder that doesn't exist yet. You want to create a new one. You can simply click on create a new one, type in the name. Let's say it's RA evaluations. And you can either create it as it is, which will put it on your main list over on the left, or you can nest it under an existing label, which is basically a way to create lots of different subfolders. And so what this enables me to do, so I'm going to go ahead and put this back in the RA training folder for the moment, is when I go over and find RA training, and again, you can organize subfolders, so I actually have RA training under my staff folder. So if I click on that, you'll see that the email is right there at the top, and these are typically organized chronologically. So you can find that email right there along with all the other ones. So folders are just really a great way to keep stuff from cluttering up your inbox, but still keeping information. And I would advise you that any sort of information that's important, information from a supervisor or from the university that you think you might need to know later, but you don't want it cluttering your inbox, go ahead and put it in a folder. Theoretically, Google has an infinite capacity for information, so you don't necessarily have to worry so much about using up all of your space. So if you're like me and you have lots and lots and lots of emails that you save over time, it might be a little cumbersome to have to go back and search through all of these folders to look for a particular email. or maybe you just don't remember where that particular email was stored. But if you know maybe the general content of the email or who sent it, you can use the search function. So let's say I wanted to find an email that I sent to my staff. One of the things that I can do is type in my name, and the email address will populate here. So I'm looking for all emails that either were sent to or sent from my email address, and so you can see all of those pop up here. But clearly, there's quite a few emails that I have either sent or received for myself, so I maybe need to be a little bit more specific. So let's say I want to find all emails that I've written related to RA training. I can start to type those in, and what you'll see that this is doing is that it's all the emails that have my email associated with it and also have to do with RA training. And so you'll see that that organizes and sorts them further. So that's just a good way to sort of quickly search for emails if you know perhaps the content or the person who sent them, et cetera, so you don't have to go picking through all those folders. So that's just a real quick way to sort of keep your inbox clean. I think inbox management is really important so that you don't lose track of things along the way. And there are a variety of other tools that you can use for that. For example, and what we're gonna do is hop over here into, actually before we go into settings, you'll notice over here that you have a couple of other little box type things, little shapes next to your emails. So there's three things here. One is just your checkbox, and that's how I highlight the email. So if I highlight the email, I can do a lot of things with it. I can put it in a folder or give it a label. I can mark it as unread. Maybe I need to come back to it later. I can mark it as important. I can add it to tasks. We're going to talk about all these pieces in just a moment. So the one next to that, you have a star. And so what a stars are is a way to prioritize your email, or maybe a thing to highlight ones that are more important to you. So let's say you have 30 or 40 emails in your inbox, and there's some that's a little bit more important. You want to make sure you don't forget about them. You can give them a star. And similarly, you can mark them as important. So that's what this little tag icon is here, is a way to mark this email as important. And what that enables you to do actually in your settings is to sort things based on that. So to demonstrate what that's going to look like, I'm actually going to star this first email, and I'm going to put a tag on this email. And now we're going to go over into our settings. So settings is where you can do a lot of neat little tricks and things with Google. And for now, we're going to look at this. So if I look down here under stars, you'll see that you can actually have multiple different colors of stars as well as a few other symbols. So stars can also be a way to organize the types of emails that you're receiving. So let's say, for example, all the emails you're getting that are related to RA training, you want to give a yellow star. But then all the emails you get related to, let's say, your English class, you want to give a red star. So I'm going to pull this up here so that we now have the ability to use red stars. So if I want to go back to, come down here and hit Save Changes. Now I want to go back here to my stars. And you should see, yes, so if you just keep clicking, it'll go through the different colors that you have active. So now I've associated this red star with my class, okay? So now we're going to go back to Settings. And now, let's see, so we're going to come over here to our inbox. Sorry, actually it's not inbox. Let's see if I can find the settings on how to set this up. Okay. So I'm actually drawing a blank at the moment as to exactly how to organize that. But at any rate, there is a way that you can set up your inbox such that the emails will actually be separated based on those little markers that you've given them. And what that'll actually result in is you can set it up in such a way that, say you want all your red stars to come up to the top, or you want all your yellow stars, or all the emails that you've marked as important, you want them to come up to the top. You have the ability to, in your settings, to configure your inbox so that it works that way. And I apologize, but at the moment I can't quite remember how you do that because it's not a setting that I personally use. But if you're someone who just really likes to organize things, that's a great way to do that. So as long as we are in settings, there's a few other things that I want to talk about. So some of these things are pretty straightforward. The conversation view, that's the way in Google that it groups all of the emails in a chain together, and that's something I always encourage you to keep on so that you can keep those like emails together. Coming down here, picture. So if you are someone that's comfortable having your picture put out there, it's a good way to kind of help people at UNCG find you quickly if they're trying to find your email in the database. Signature, some of you may be familiar with this. This is something that pops up at the end of all of your emails where you can put your name, maybe some of your roles on campus and your contact information. And down here we have our vacation responder, which is something that, depending on your role on campus, you may or may not use particularly often, but it's something that you can turn on and off that sends automatic responses to individuals who email you in the event, say, you may not be available to respond to emails for an extended period of time. That's something really helpful to use. Earlier we talked about the labels and the folders. This is just a place where you can sort of manage them in your settings. Pretty much the same things that you can do over here on the side, but this is another place you can find them. Inbox, nothing particularly useful in that area. If we want to go over here, but what we're going to do now is go over here to chat. So in a moment we're going to talk a little bit about GChat, and this is the area where you can manage your different settings for that. But what I do want to talk about now for a moment is labs. And so labs are essentially add-ons or plugins. You might have heard a lot of different names for these types of things, but it's things that you can enable on your Gmail that will allow you to do a few other things. So a couple of the ones that I use, one of which is canned responses. And so essentially what a canned response is it allows you to create certain messages that you can save to your, that you can save within your email account so that you don't have to do it each time. So let's say you have a certain type of email that you get often and you give a pretty standard response at the same time, but you don't want to have to rewrite that response every time. For example, I might email a student information that a new student who just moved into the building. There might be some basic information that I need to email them as soon as they move in. So I could do that as a canned response and save it, and then when I send an email to that new student, I can just choose that canned response and it'll automatically pop it in and I don't have to worry about retyping all of that. Right side chat, so by default, Google Chat actually pops down over here in your lower left column where your folders are. But for me, and especially for someone who uses folders actively, it's a little easier just to have it over here on the right side so that you can see both of those in greater detail. So that's something else that you can enable. So those are really the two primary ones that I make use of, but there are quite a few different labs here that you can look through based on your interests, and just to play around to see if any of these you think would be helpful in implementing the work that you need to do. So as I indicated earlier, you have GChat, which is, most of you are probably familiar with it. It's kind of like an instant messaging service built in within Gmail. So this is a good way to kind of quickly chat with people that you might email with regularly. And so if they're on their email and they're using it, they'll typically pop up here as green. Let's say they might have set up an away message, so maybe their computer and their email's up, but they're not actually using it, as you can see here. It pops up in red. Yellow is folks that their email is up, but they haven't done anything on it in a while, so it's kind of gone into sleep mode, and then these are all of our folks that are offline. So by default, if I can go back to our chat settings for a moment, by default, people that you communicate with via email are going to automatically start to pop up over here that you communicate with often. So let's say you're emailing your supervisor frequently. After a while, they're eventually going to pop up in your chat over here automatically. For me personally, I changed this setting to only people that I've explicitly approved. Otherwise, random residents and people that or people that you might not necessarily want to GChat with or want to have the ability to GChat with you may start to pop up over here as well. So this way you can sort of control who appears over there. So let's say you want to invite someone to chat with, much like the directory that's built into Gmail when you're emailing someone at the university. I can start to type in the name of anyone at the university, and they will automatically start to pop up here. So let's say I wanted to GChat Linda Brady. Probably not going to happen, but I can type her in and she starts to pop up there. And then you can invite that person to chat, and on their end, if they approve, they'll pop up in your GChat list and you can start to talk with them. So GChat is just another really cool function that you can use to communicate with people quickly. The next piece that I want to talk about, which I think personally is one of the neatest functions, especially if you're someone who likes to keep to-do lists, there's a way that you can integrate your to-do list with your calendar as well as your email account. So let's say, for example, and I'm going to go back real quick and pull my test email back out. So I'm going to put this back in the inbox. Let's say you want to put something back in your inbox. You can go back up to the folders and just click inbox, and it'll automatically put it back up there in case you need to bring it back into your inbox for whatever reason. So there is a feature called tasks, which is basically a digital to-do list. So let's say I've got this email, and this email is prompting me to do something. Maybe it's an email from my supervisor saying you need to fill out this paperwork. But maybe I don't have time to do that paperwork right now, or maybe that paperwork isn't due for like 2 weeks. So I'm going to do it a little bit closer to the deadline. But I still don't want this email cluttering my inbox during that time. What I can do is add it to my task list, which you'll see pops up here at the bottom. And so by default, it's going to put the name of the email as the task list there. So let's say I want to call this complete paperwork. If I click this little right arrow here, it gives me some options of what I can do with this. So I can put some additional notes here. Or what I use very frequently is to set a due date. So let's say this paperwork has to be done by the 6th of August. So you can set that there, and then you can go back to list, and it appears here in your list. And I actually have my settings for my to-do list in such a way that it does organize them by their due date, which is very helpful. So now what this does is it enables me to file this email back away, which it's already labeled. So I'm just going to hit my little archive button here. Let's see. So now what that has done is I can come back to my to-do list at any point. And the other handy thing here is if you associate a task with an email, you can just click related email underneath it, and it'll automatically take you back to that email without having to search for it again, which is really handy. So we're going to talk a little bit more about calendars in the next module, but I will go ahead and show you the other advantage of using tasks and setting these due dates, which is that once you set a due date, let's see, something appears to have gone wrong here. Let me just fix this real quick. August 6th, okay. I'm going to go ahead and reload. There we go. So you'll see now under August 6th on my calendar, it has popped up this little paperwork, or the task that I set for myself has popped up there. So that's a really good way to sort of manage some of the due dates, maybe for paperwork you have to do or things that you have to submit. And then once that task is done, either on your calendar or back over here on your to-do list, you can easily click to cross that thing off your to-do list. So again, that's just a really neat way to sort of manage your to-do list. Granted, if you still like the old paper and pen version, that works as well. But if you want to integrate it into your calendar, into your email, it's a really handy tool to use. So the last thing that I will mention with regard to the Gmail interface is you may have noticed up here in the right-hand corner, I have this little colorful boomerang icon. Similarly, if I want to compose an email, you'll notice that I have this little extra button down here that says Send Later. So this is a tool in Gmail. It's an add-on called Boomerang. And Boomerang is specifically designed, really kind of serves two main purposes. One of which, as the name might suggest, is it's a way to have an email or something come back to you. So if you want to boomerang something, basically it resends an email after so many days if it doesn't receive a reply. So let's say you want to email a faculty member about coming into the hall and doing a program, and they don't get you don't get a reply after say 3 or 4 days, it will resend that email to them again, just kind of as a reminder. I don't necessarily use that feature as much because I like to manage that more intentionally, but what I really find useful in it is the send later function. So let's say you need to send a long email to your students, and you happen to be writing it at 11 o'clock at night because that's the earliest you were able to do it, but you don't want to send it that night. So one way, of course, to do that is just to save it to your drafts, but a more efficient way, in my opinion, that way you don't have to worry about remembering it later, is the send later feature. And so what this allows you to do is to schedule this email to be sent at a later time. So you could send it in an hour, in 2 hours, tomorrow morning, tomorrow afternoon, in a few days, or you can set a specific time at which you want that to be sent. And so let's say, for example, I want to send this to myself. And I can schedule that to be sent, let's say, tomorrow morning. And so you'll see it's scheduling the message. And anything that you send will come over here and appear in your Boomerang inbox. And so what that enables you to do is anything that you put in here that hasn't been sent yet, until it is sent, you can actually come in your Boomerang inbox and edit that. So let's say, oh wait, I needed to add something to that message, or maybe I want to schedule a different time, or even go ahead and send. You have the ability to manage that on the back end. So Boomerang is not something that comes automatically with Gmail. It's something that you have to download and install from online. But if you just type that into your search engine, Boomerang Gmail, you can find the add-on that you will just install on your computer, and then it will automatically add it into your Gmail interface. So that concludes this tutorial on Gmail. Certainly does not cover each and every element that you can do within that, but these are the things that I've found to be the most useful and the most important to really help you be more efficient in your work. So stay tuned for our next video. We'll be talking about Google Calendars.